So my favorite thing about Record of Ragnarok is its unpredictability, not just in the fights, but basically in the entire series as a whole. Think about it. We have no idea if this series is just going to end after the tournament or if there's going to be more. I personally believe there's more. I think there's a lot of setup for there to be more. And as I've reread through it a couple of times, I've picked up on a lot of nuggets that are going to be crucial for post-Ragnarok. But there's also unpredictability when it comes to characters, character traits, and the motivations for their actions and what their end goals actually are. So in this video, we're going to be talking about Odin, and is Odin a traitor to the gods? And by extension, are the Norse basically traitors to the gods as a whole? When I started to think about this, it was basically because of this interaction between Odin and Zeus when they went and stopped Buddha, Loki, and the seven lucky gods from all fighting in the garden. And Zeus says to Odin, "At any rate, Ragnarok isn't going quite as expected. Now is it, leader of the Norse?" And he turns away and goes back to the arena, but Odin didn't look at him. And we see on the bottom, Odin actually cracks a little smile, and his own raven is confused. That little smile turns into a devious, wide-eyed grin. And a lot of people don't know, but Odin is also a god of death. And as his excitement seemingly boiled over, the flowers and the plant life in the garden was disintegrating and dying. Now alone, I wouldn't say that that is the basis to just say, okay, Odin he's evil, but it shows that he's plotting something and there's motivations that we have no idea about. This prompted me to look much deeper into every single time Odin is pictured. And this is probably his second most suspect interaction. This comes after Buddha had defeated Hajin, and we got the revelation that Beelzebub actually created the Hajin that we saw by implanting him into Zerofuko as one of his experiments. And my belief is that he was doing it because he wanted Hajin to eventually fight him, and maybe he was going to be the one to finally end Beelzebub's suffering. But after Hajin fell, Beelzebub went to destroy the evidence of his involvement. He threw all the data into the fire, but before he could finish, Odin arrived, and he said, "So that was all you're doing all along, Beelzebub." Beelzebub ignored him. But then the Ravens, they're just kind of, I don't know if they're an extension of just Odin's mind or what, but he's saying, "Don't ignore us. You're doing some weird experiment." But the Ravens' words aren't what's important. It's Odin himself who says, "I've waited a long, long time in preparation for this battle. I will permit no one to disrupt it." And Beelzebub hears this and he repeats, "A long, long time," and he questions this. And for the first time, he looks back at Odin and he says, "How intriguing." And you can see that Odin is kind of taken back by this response, almost like he's overplayed his hand, because Beelzebub is one of the smartest people in this verse, and it seems that he sees through whatever plot Odin is behind. We don't get any more of this interaction for now, but since the current fight is Beelzebub, we may get more into what transpired after this scene. So after these two interactions, I was pretty much sold, and I was very curious to see how Odin was reacting to the news of Ragnarok. And when Brynhilde showed up, there's a weird look in Odin's eye, but he stayed silent. And yes, I know it looks like his ravens are saying, "Know your place, demigod," and "How dare you barge into our conversation." But as you saw in the previous scene, this one right here, the ravens do not have all the information regarding Odin's true feelings. And what I found interesting is Brynhilde continued to talk. She says, "Does humanity deserve to exist for another 1,000 years? May I suggest testing them? You can even display your divine might and mercy while doing so." His raven says cliche, but if you look at Odin, there's a twink sound effect, which I view as like a light bulb going off in his head. And in the panel below, his eyes look dark, like he's in deep thought over something. And at first I disregarded all this because of what the Ravens were saying, but as I mentioned just previously, what they say really doesn't matter in the grand scheme. But then I thought about it more, and I realized that the Valkyries are direct servants to Odin. I don't feel like Brynhilde or any of the other Valkyries really could have even gone about this without maybe having permission from Odin, especially considering later on when Beelzebub confronts Adamas, who is planning on taking revenge on Brunhilde herself for not giving up Qin Shi Huang's location. He states that, "Don't you know if you killed that Valkyrie, Ragnarok would have been over?" Well, I'm thinking Odin could easily, if not himself, just send Thor. The Valkyries fear Thor, as I showed, or just himself could have just laid down the authority that you guys are not going to intervene, or he could have just wiped them out himself. But for some reason, the Norse pantheon has allowed the Valkyries to go on with Ragnarok. And furthermore, in regards to this Beelzebub interaction, take note that this took place after his conversation with Odin. And after that conversation, he then justifies stopping Adamus by telling him, hey, look, I don't want Ragnarok to be over. Do not deprive me of my enjoyment. And as Brunhilde and Gold think, he was just doing them a solid, saving them, somewhat righteous in a sense. He says, you two had better be careful. I doubt that it's just me and him who wish to wipe out all of humanity and are finding it hard to keep that urge under control. And lo and behold, the gods pictured are Loki and Odin. Now, I don't believe he's just speculating. I don't believe that it's a coincidence that Odin and Loki are at the bottom. I don't see Beelzebub really going around talking to more of these gods. I think from that one interaction with Odin where he figured him out, I think he knows what Odin's true motivation is, or at least has an idea. And it's not just to wipe out all of humanity. It has something to do with Ragnarok as well. Now, Beelzebub's motivations are clear. Obviously, he wants to wipe out humanity, but he also wants to die. So Ragnarok's a perfect opportunity for him to maybe find a worthy opponent. And as we see, he's fighting Tesla now. So as long as his motivations aren't interfering with Odin's, they seem to be okay. Now, also take note that Hajin, when he was formed from Zero Fuko, gave the gods a much better chance of winning that round. But the problem was that the debacle with Hajin did not look good because it wasn't the original fighter. It was an unforeseen circumstance. Hajin didn't wish to fight for the gods. He was a demon lord that was a straight up wild card. And that's an instance which could have went very bad for the Ragnarok tournament. Had Hajin won, he might have just jumped up and tried to fight all these gods. It could have got out of control and Ragnarok could have been halted. That's why I think that Odin was pissed off. So he's not so much worried about wiping out humanity at a baseline level. He wants Ragnarok to continue for a reason. Picking up on all this actually going to Odin's plans, this is one detail that I don't think a lot of people noticed at all. And they just viewed it in passing as it happened. But Loki is very, very close with Odin. And there was an interaction as Sasuke came to defend Buddha where Loki and Buddha were going to fight over Buddha being a traitor and all that nonsense. Where Sasuke says, give me a break. You gods are all my way or the highway. Like everything's just going to go the way you want it to. Loki says something very, very interesting. Now, keep in mind, this is after Hercules just died, a Greek god, and Poseidon was just defeated before that. So two gods lost right back to back. He says, not gonna. It already is. So in Loki's mind, everything is going just according to plan. And Okita instantly recognizes that Loki is a bad god, that there's something deeper going on here. So logically, this leads you to believe that Odin might be using Ragnarok to gain more power. Maybe he wants to become the full-on chief god of the cosmos, which seems like is Zeus at this point. I know Odin is one of the chief gods, but if anything, it seems like the motivation would be for the Greeks to be wiped out. Now, keep in mind, the gods that are losing the most fights, 3 Greek gods have been defeated: Hades, Hercules, and Poseidon. That pantheon grows weaker and weaker as Ragnarok continues, and there's yet another Greek that's set to fight with Apollo. Now, the Norse are fighting, but Thor won his fight, and thus, that's why it seems that things are going as planned. But it's not so simple because we also have interactions like this, where when Buddha announced that he was betraying the gods, Loki and Odin were visibly enraged. But oddly enough, Thor actually smiled at this news. So my theory is Odin does want humanity to be destroyed. He wants the gods to win Ragnarok, but he wants the Norse to be the reason that they win. This is why I believe Odin will be the final fight, and I believe Loki will win his fight. Also because for post-Ragnarok events, it seems like it's very likely Loki will be around for them as he had beef with Buddha, which sets up a fight between them two. And like I'm saying, it pushes the narrative that the Norse are the winners, the Greeks are the losers. And Zeus won his fight as he's the top dog, but he's not going to be enough to fight the Norse post-Ragnarok. And thus when Buddha flipped sides, I think it was just because it added the probability that the humans, could actually stand a chance. He still wants them to lose. Now, with all that being said, I actually think that Buddha may be the antithesis to Odin on a much deeper level than we thought before. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, I feel like Odin at some level had to allow the Valkyries to do this. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. In all the lore, Valkyries are servants to Odin directly, and even if they weren't in this, as we've seen, Ragnarok would straight up end if Brunhilde was taken out. Odin could have easily sent Thor or done it himself, wiped out the Valkyries, or imprisoned them, whatever he decided. And if you don't believe me, here's Brunhilde straight up immediately bending the knee to Thor as he showed up without hesitancy. Now, this wasn't shown in the anime, it was manga only. Thor actually saved her from a demon, and she was scared shitless of Thor. And he said, "What are you playing at, Brunhilde?" So Thor doesn't know all that they're working on either. But I feel like him protecting Brunhilde there, because as we know, it would have been over with if she had died there to that demon, further reinforces that, the Norse want Ragnarok to go on, but they don't know all the full details. And I think Thor has the least care about the scenario, because I think he truly just cares for a really strong fight, maybe getting a worthy opponent. I think he'll fight for the Norse, but I don't think he's as invested in the grand scheme plot as Loki and Odin are. He said to her, "Whatever it is, just make it worth my while, otherwise I'll kill you." Now back to the Buddha debacle. Now the reason I think that they don't have all the answers is because they needed Buddha to learn how to do Volund, Fates Intertwined. And I think at some level, Odin knew about this. He knew it was going to happen with Buddha. He knew this was going to be the way they were going. But he doesn't have control over what Buddha's going to do. And Buddha can lead the uprising against Odin. And that's why he's telling Kintoki in this scene right here to go find the man who will shake up Ragnarok, Siegfried, the dragon-slaying hero. Now, who is Siegfried? Now, in Norse lore, Siegfried or Sigurd is known to be Brunhilde's lover. Now, there's a lot of stories that go along with that, but in the gist, that's how it is. And I'm going to make a full video kind of covering Brunhilde's motivations, but basically, she was a human at one point. It's stated that the tragic Valkyrie who was once transformed into a human has so much empathy for humans. I believe Siegfried is the reason that she loves humans so much. I believe that is her lover in this series. I believe that's why she wants to fight for them. And I believe Siegfried may be the one to fight with Brunhilde. If you guys haven't noticed, the Valkyries that Volund with humans usually fall in love with their human. I believe her best match would be Siegfried, although he's not on the roster, and they might fight Odin. I think it's going to be a big bait and switch. That means one of the humans will probably not end up fighting. They already actually have an extra human right now. The gods have to throw in another one because of Buddha's whole betrayal thing. They already threw in Hades, but they actually have to put another one in because a god fought against Hades, meaning that they are still one member below. That is assuming that they go the full 7v7 route and Ragnarok doesn't end before that. But that's my theory. I think that Odin is undermining Zeus. I think he wants the Greeks to be wiped out or weakened severely so he can take absolute power. He wants the Norse to be the reason for the gods' victory, but Buddha is going to be the #1 thorn in his side. And keep an eye on Beelzebub as well, because we found out Beelzebub is Satan. We obviously know all about his curse. If my theory about how Tesla and Beelzebub's fight's going to end, which I'll make a whole video on that, if it ends, keep an eye out for Beelzebub being a huge factor post-Ragnarok opposing Odin. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next one.